souls in danger, look above. Jesus completely saves. He will lift you by his love out of the angry wave. He's the master of the sea, who's his will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me.
Well, it's good to be here tonight. It's good to see you all here. It's a little, I don't know what your word is. A lot of people missing tonight because of Vacation Bible School, which you know that. And so just be praying for that as that goes on this week. And a lot of people are involved in that. And so their subject, which you may know already, is the Destination Dig. They're talking about Noah's Ark tonight. You know, and they're telling the kids about how the Lord saves, how the Lord does all that. But be praying for them. I went back and forth on whether to look at the Ark, Noah's Ark, go back and look at that, kind of follow that same thing as what the Vacation Bible School is doing. But I just didn't have peace in doing that. So I'm not. But just be praying for them. We're going to look at the book of Daniel tonight. Finding Christ in every book of the Bible is what we're going to look at tonight. So turn, if you will, to Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. There's a lot of books that you can go to and you can read, you can look up and find all different kinds of what people have wrote about finding Christ in every book of the Bible. Some of those you'll find and you'll agree with. Some of those you'll find and you'll think, where in the world did they get that from? But here, Daniel chapter 3 is one that is most common to a lot of books, a lot of people. When you think about finding Daniel and finding Christ in the book of Daniel, this is one of the first records I think about in the book of Daniel. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is what chapter 3 is about. And you know these three that King Nebuchadnezzar here in verse 1 of chapter 3, it says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was three score cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, and he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And I'm not going to read all of this, but Nebuchadnezzar set this statue up, and he sent through all his provinces, and the governors and captains and judges and treasurers and counselors and everybody, that what we want you to do when you hear the music, all of this music playing, that you bow down and worship this statue. That's what he had, and that's what he wanted everybody to do. So then they got it all ready, and they sent it out, and they played this music, and everybody bowed down, except for 3 young men. They did not bow down. And the word got back to the king, and King Nebuchadnezzar, he was a little upset because, after all, it was the king, right? He had this set up, and he wanted this done. And so he called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to him, and he said, is this right? Look, he said, I want to give you another chance. I know, you're of the captivity, right? So I'm going to give you another chance. So he said, I'm going to play this music again. And when you hear this music, you bow down and we'll all be good. If not, then we're going to throw you into the burning fiery furnace. How many of you have ever put wood in a furnace? I mean, I have. My mom and dad had a furnace. It's a stove, I guess, is what I think of. My grandpa had a big furnace, and that's how he heated his house. It was in the basement down there. And you go down there, and yes, that is my grandma and grandpa Mac. He never let us put wood in that furnace, though. I thank the Lord for that, because we have to go down to the basement. But this furnace, you think about how big this furnace was that he was thinking we're going to throw you into. Because they were going to throw 3 men into this burning fiery furnace. This is huge. Not like a furnace that heats a house, okay? This is huge. And in chapter 3 here, you look at what they say. So here in 14, or let's go back to 13, verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if ye be ready, this is where he's telling them the second time. If ye be ready, when you hear all of this, the music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, it'll be good, it will be fine. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And then Nebuchadnezzar adds this little part on that end of verse 15. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Who is that God that's going to deliver you out of his hands? Who is that God that's going to deliver us out of the world's hands? This world sometimes looks big. It looks furious. It looks powerful. But don't ever forget who our God is. Don't ever forget who the God is that stands for us. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. What does that mean? We are not careful. What they're saying there is, King, we don't have to think about the answer. We don't have to get together in our little huddle over here and talk about what you're saying and decide what we're going to do. We don't have to think about it, and we're not going to worry about it, because here's our answer. And you look at what they answer, what they say in verse 16. Verse 17 says, If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. You look at that statement. That statement, Paul said that he is sure of whom he serves. He knows whom he serves. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego right here are saying the same thing. I know that God is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. They know whom they are serving. And then they go on and they say, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Those two statements are two amazing statements when you look at them, because they have total and complete faith that God is going to deliver them. But you look, when we look at this, we think sometimes, I say we because, well, okay, I'll change that and say I think sometimes. When difficulties come, when you're looking at possible persecution, it's not an enjoyable thing to look at, is it? It's not. And we're not really persecuted like this at all. We may be called names. We may be frowned upon. We may be told to leave. I don't want to hear this anymore. But here, when they say this, you look at what they say. God is able, and he will. Look, he will deliver us out of your hands. In verse 18, he says, but if not. This is what they tell the king, but if not. That but if not does not refer to he will. It refers back to he is able. Not that he's not able. Look, he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Either we are going through the burning fiery furnace or we're not, but either way, we're not bowing down. That's what they're saying. We're not going to be under your control. We're not going to be bowing down. We're not going to be according to your hand. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Do you think maybe, I wonder, but then I go back to verse 16, because I wonder sometimes, were they nervous? Verse 16 says, look, we're not careful in this. We're not nervous about telling you. We're not worried about what you're going to do, because the God that we serve is so much more than you are. You think about who King Nebuchadnezzar was. The power that he had. The realm that he reigned over. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood before him and said, we don't care what you say. We're not bowing down to it. God is able. Now, whether he will or not is up to him. But be it known unto thee, O king, we're not going to serve your gods. And verse 19 says, then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury. Why? Why was he full of fury? Because he's the king and he's proud. He's very proud of what he's formed. And the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wanted to be heated. So whatever the maximum is that it wants to be heated, go more than that. Heat it up so hot that the 3 strongest men in his kingdom, it says here, verse 21, then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and in their hats. I don't know why that cracks me up. It mentions that even in their hats were thrown in. He didn't want anything left of them. Everything. They were bound in all of it, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So, even the men that threw them in died from the heat coming off of this furnace, coming out of this furnace. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Now you think about that. In our minds, in my mind, I picture, and I've worked around some pretty big boilers, I've worked around some pretty big furnaces and things like that, that are huge. But I haven't worked around anything this big. But you think about this furnace that's big enough that 3 grown men can be thrown in there. The opening that is, it's huge. The furnace itself is huge, and they're thrown in there, bound. And it says, then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished and rose up in haste. I often wonder, whenever I read this, you know, I've told you before that I watched the movie happen in my head. And I see, so that makes me wonder, is Nebuchadnezzar sitting there and he's all proud of himself because now he's made a point to everyone that doesn't want to follow him now. This is what's going to happen to you. You're going to listen to me or you're going to die, period. That's it. And I can just see him sitting there in all of his pomp and luster and everything, and he's so proud of himself. And they're thrown in there, and he's waiting for the screams. And that's why he stands up astonished. Because what he sees as he looks in here, he stands up astonished, rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Seems like a strange question. They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. When you think of finding Christ in Daniel, this is one of the first things I think of. Is that, and you look at this picture here, he's with them. The Lord is with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, when Stephen was stoned, it's amazing to me to read that. Because when Stephen was stoned, what was it says that he looked up and saw heaven opened, and Christ, what? Standing at the right hand of God. I look at that, that didn't mean anything to me at all until I had children, and I had to stand by and watch them do something that was hard, that was difficult, where they could get hurt. I couldn't sit and watch. I had to stand and be ready. You know, and I look at that and I think, wow, Christ was there standing. He wasn't sitting. And I'm not putting a human thing to him at all. Like my part was I was helpless in a lot of that, but he wasn't. He was there. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here are going through the burning fiery furnace, Christ is there. He's there with them in that fire. And there is no hurt to them. Verse 26, Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed. Neither were their coats singed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. This is, you think about how quick and how easily fire singes the hair on your arms, right? I don't know if y'all remember, when we moved here, we moved a smoker and a charcoal grill and a gas grill all in one, right? Well, in the moving, the bouncing, the gas grill has needed rebuilt for a really long time. So finally, it was last month or maybe a month before that, I don't remember. I finally was able to rebuild that. And with the gas grill, you know, you turn the gas on and you turn the burner on, and then you got this little igniter thing that you ignite that puts a spark there. Well, unbeknownst to me, you're supposed to make sure that sparker thing is close enough to that, to spark, okay, to the burner. I didn't do that part, so when I tried it out, it wasn't lighting like I thought it was supposed to. It wasn't doing it. I had it burner turned on and I was pushing the button and it was clicking, but nothing was happening. So then, without thinking, I reached over and turned the other burner on and hit the button again. Well, that one was close enough. But what do I have going in this grill? Got propane going in there. So as soon as I hit the button, it lit. And it went, whew. My eyebrows were singed. My arms, my hair on my arms was singed. My beard was singed. Just like that. And you look at this, and they were walking around in this fire that was so hot, it killed the 3 men that threw them in there. And yet, they weren't even singed by this flame. How powerful is this God? How powerful is God? I shouldn't say this God. How powerful is God that we serve? I mean, just that instant of that flame coming past me singed. I would say the hair on my head, but you would chuckle at that because I don't have much hair on my head. It singed my arms and my mustache and my eyebrows. But they didn't have anything. The hair was not singed. And it goes on here in this verse and says that their head was not, nor their hair, nor was the hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. This is power. This is God's power and protection of them, for them, to them. You ever lit a match? Light a match and put it and light a fire. You ever smelled your finger after you light a match? You get the smell of that match on your finger. They were in this fire, and none of that was on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar, verse 28, spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. You think about how this ends and what the king said in verse 15, and who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? He found out who that God is, didn't he? He found out that God not only can protect them from the fire, but he can protect them from the heat of the fire. He can protect them from the smell of the fire while they're in the midst of that. He can protect them from all of it. One of the things I don't like doing, and there are 2 days that I like smoking meat. Of course, I like eating meat, so I like smoking meat and all that kind of stuff, grilling and all that. But there's 2 days that I do not want to grill or smoke meat. That's Sundays and Wednesdays. Because I can't go to bed after I've smoked or grilled. Because that smell is all over me. And I can't do that. I have to take a shower. And Sundays, I don't want to come to church smelling like a smoker. Not like a cigarette smoker, I mean like a meat smoker. You know, I feel like I have to make that distinction there. But I don't want to smell that way. But the Lord protected them. And it says that the fourth is as the Son of God. Okay, the Lord was there with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We look at this, and the Lord promises to never leave us nor forsake us. He's there with us. Everywhere we go, every step we make, he's there. Another place I think about with Christ is in Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. This gets into some of the prophecies and that the years that are mentioned here in Daniel chapter 9 and verse 25. Daniel chapter 9 verse 25, it says here, knowing therefore and understand that from going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks, and the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be of a flood. And unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. And you look at these, is one of those things that is difficult to understand, as prophecies and all of this. But in verse 25, it talks about until the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem and the Messiah, the Prince. Can you think of a book in the Bible when the commandment was given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem? Thinking of Ezra and Nehemiah? Like in the beginning of Ezra chapter 1, when, I'm going to turn back over there, Ezra chapter 1. In fact, yeah, there it is. Ezra chapter 1, it says here, and there's a lot of different, you can look up different on this prophecy and commentaries. Not many of them agree. A lot of them mention in Ezra chapter 1 when Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build an house at Jerusalem, which is in Judea. And he sent this proclamation out, and in Ezra, he sent them, anybody who wanted to go back to build the house of God, to go back, you can do that. And then also some people will, commentaries will take it to, I think it's Ezra chapter 7. Ezra chapter 7, to the letter that Artaxerxes, I say it different every time, so. But the king there, King Artaxerxes, when he sent a letter back telling them, no, you're going to help them build this, and you're going to build this, you're going to provide the material for them, and any taxes taken up over there on that side is going to go to the building of this. So there's different ideas and thoughts on that, or when that goes back to, but that's what he's talking about here in Daniel chapter 9, here in verse 25. It's 7 weeks, which is 49 years. 7 weeks times 7. 7 times 7 is 49. This, in verse 27, this 1 week is 7 years. So we understand that 1 week is 7 years. 7 weeks is 49 years, and 62 weeks, that is, I didn't write that down. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did. Oh, shoot. I was thinking I'm going to do math in my head in front of everybody. That's going to get embarrassing. But it's 62 weeks. 62 weeks is 62 weeks. That's 434 weeks to 62 times 7. You add those together, you come up with what? 483 years. And then you have 483 years. And they, up here there's 490, 70 weeks. 70 times 7 in verse 24 is 490. So the tribulation period in verse 27 is what that talks about. That's the 7th week. That's the 7 years left in all of that. And when you go back and you look up these numbers, you go back and look all this up, because this is what it's talking about. It's a prophecy of when it says there in verse 26, and after 62 weeks, that's after the 434 years that the Messiah will be cut off. That's Christ. You can go to, hang on. It's in, I can't remember Matthew, Mark, Luke, but I think John chapter 12. Yeah, John chapter 12. Is when Christ comes in riding on the colt, right? That's when Christ comes in riding on the colt. On the next day, on verse 12, John 12, verse 12 says, on the next day, much people that were come to the feast, when they had heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, took branches of palm trees and went forth to meet him and cried, Hosanna, blessed is the King of Israel that cometh in the name of the Lord. And Jesus, when he had found the young ass, sat thereon, as it is written, Fear not the daughter of Zion, behold, the king cometh, set up on an ass's colt. And these things understood the disciples not at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then remembered they that these things were written of him, and that they had done these things unto him. From what I understand, this is part of the fulfilling of that prophecy there in Daniel that it's talking about, and this is also the same year, the same time when Christ was cut off. And that verse 26 of Daniel chapter 9, it says, "And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off." But what does it say after that? But not for himself. Why was he killed? Not because of any sin upon him. He wasn't killed because of himself. He was killed because of us. He went to the cross and died because of our sins, to give us redemption, to give us a way of salvation. So that's another time that I think about Christ in the book of Daniel. But those are just a couple references there of Christ. But, and a lot of this prophecy in Daniel is difficult to understand. I've been reading it, that Ezekiel and Daniel, reading through these, praying about these quite a bit, reading through them, looking at them. I read some commentaries on them, and honestly, some of the commentaries confused me. But be in prayer for those around us that are lost, that we'll be a witness to them. Remember them in our prayers. Remember those that have lost loved ones, that have passed on. Remember them in our prayers. Be praying for our country. This is going to be a difficult year. It's an election year. Went and voted yesterday. We need to be praying the Lord's will be done in all of this. But at the same time, we're praying the Lord's will be done in all of this. We need to make sure we're doing what we ought to be doing. And that is seeking his face, that is voting, and that is just letting the Lord lead in all of it. And just trusting him in that. I think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego there in Daniel in a pagan land. But yet the people that went against Daniel could not find anything against him, except for to find it against his God. Because even in a pagan land, he served the Lord. And where are we? We're in a pagan land, is where we are. So it's possible to serve the Lord. It's difficult, but it's possible even where we are to serve the Lord. So if the song leader will come and the piano player, if you will, and if you will stand, and we'll have a verse of song for an invitation.